Welcome to Fiscal Note Training. My name is Susie Lindsay, and I'm nonpartisan legislative staff with the Legislative Fiscal Division. I will be going through this training with you today. And I'll be sharing some slides. As I said, my name is Susie Lindsay, and I'll be giving you a rundown on the process of what fiscal notes, what they are, how, if you are a legislator and you have a fiscal note attached to your bill, how you can get that adjusted if you need to, and what the details are of a fiscal note. So first, let's talk about what the purpose of the fiscal note is. It's a report on the financial impacts of a bill, and it's prepared by the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning. They're required on all bills that are reported out of a committee that will impact revenues or expenditures of the state, any counties in Montana, or any municipalities. Again, the Governor's Office of Budget and Program Planning puts together the fiscal notes by using the state agencies to help them develop the assumptions for the fiscal notes. The Governor's Office will explain and defend assumptions and calculations to legislators and the public on the fiscal notes. They're the ones that send the fiscal notes to legislative leadership, and they will change fiscal notes if it's warranted. This slide shows you an example of a fiscal note. The first page is always a fiscal summary, and it always talks about a short summary of the description of the fiscal impact. This particular bill was from the 2023 session, and it amended the Class 8 business equipment property tax, and it exempted property in that classification for $1 million. It was a complicated piece of legislation, and so therefore the fiscal note is also quite complex. Each fiscal note will have assumptions in detail, and this particular fiscal note has multiple pages of assumptions that the Department of Revenue explains in detail. On the back page of the fiscal notes, every one of them will have a more detailed listing of the cost or the revenue impact from the legislation. This particular piece of legislation breaks out different components of expenditures. For example, this particular piece of legislation impacted the entitlement share payments to local governments, the state guaranteed tax base for K-12 education, as well as impacting the revenues, both general fund and state special. A lot of the fiscal notes will have a general fund impact. You'll be able to see the net impact of the general fund on the back sheet of a fiscal note. And those net impacts will show up on the general fund status sheet if a bill has received a positive action in a committee or on that floor, either of the floors. The signature page of the fiscal note will have the budget director's, the governor's budget director's initials and a date and a place for where the sponsor can sign or not sign the fiscal note. And I will discuss more of that in detail. So again, who requests fiscal notes? Any committee that's considering the bill may request a fiscal note on a bill as needed. If the committee feels that there might be an impact a fiscal impact, they will request a fiscal note. Sometimes the fiscal notes will come back with a 0 impact. The majority of the House may also request a fiscal note when the bill is going to be considered for second reading on the House floor. And the sponsor may also request, through the presiding officer, a fiscal note. So again, I'm Susie Lindsay with the Legislative Fiscal Division. And what is the Legislative Fiscal Division's role with fiscal notes? We don't write them. Again, the governor's office does that. But we do review them in detail, and we track any of them that are general fund in a database, and those general fund implications, if the legislation is passing and has received positive action, it will be reported out on the general fund status sheet, which is reported about midway through session and thereafter weekly. We also will explain any fiscal note to the sponsor or any other legislators that come by on the implications of the fiscal impacts. If it's a complicated tax bill, you might consider coming down and talking with Mr. Schaefer in our office. He is our lead revenue analyst, and he tracks all tax bills going through. Or myself, I can help with any of the expenditure fiscal notes, or we can get you to the actual analyst that would know the details of a specific piece of legislation. We can work with the sponsor and the bill drafter through any technical issues that might be causing a fiscal impact. And occasionally, at the discretion of legislative leadership, we can produce an alternative fiscal note. Again, this is very rare occurrence, but occasionally these do happen. So what if you're a legislator and you have a fiscal note that's attached to your bill and you don't agree with the fiscal note? You don't like the numbers, you don't agree with the assumptions. What can you do? You have choices when you don't agree, but you are under time constraints, and those time constraints are explained in statute if you want to look those up. But basically, these are what you could do. You can talk to the governor's budget office who made the fiscal note, and you can ask them for their opinion to fix it. They can help you explain it. They can help explain the impacts and their point of view as to how they developed the fiscal note. You can talk again to the Legislative Fiscal Division staff, myself, or other analysts in our office, and we can help you understand it before you take any next steps. You can also write your own fiscal note by submitting a sponsor's rebuttal, or you can sign or not sign on that line that I showed you on a previous slide. If you don't sign the fiscal note, oftentimes it sends a message that you disagree. And you can talk to leadership. You can ask for additional time to prepare your sponsor's rebuttal. And you can do this when the fiscal note assumptions are significantly incorrect, or if there's a material impact on the general fund status sheet. This slide shows you the example of the sponsor's rebuttal to the fiscal note. It has been changed since the 2023 session. There's been slight changes to the form. So even if you're a returning legislator, you'll see a couple of slight changes. Mainly a reminder that there is a turnaround time for the date. Again, if you have questions, I'm Susie Lindsay in the Fiscal Division, and I'm available via email, susie.lindsay@legmt.gov. I'm also in room 117 in the state capitol. And if you're a legislator, I'm on Teams and will answer you quickly if you reach out on Teams. Thank you.